Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on how to plan content and get results. Just to introduce myself, my name is Matilda Igeri Cooper, and I'm the creative content lead at Southerly, a creative content agency based in London. Now, on a day-to-day, I wear a few hats as my job is a combination of content strategy, content production, SEO management, and marketing for our clients, as well as Southerly. So prior to the agency, I was working in the media since the early 2000s, producing content for publications such as Time Out London, the Evening Standard, and CNN. So one of the reasons I'm actually presenting this topic today is because of my editorial background, but I'm also quite passionate about how to plan content so it's effective and reaps the sort of benefits that your business or organization is looking for. So we've actually got several things on the agenda which you should find useful. And if you want to definitely get a better understanding of how to make content really work for you. So to kick off, we'll start by defining and establishing what exactly is a content strategy and look at all the things we really should consider to actually do one effectively. Now, this actually includes coming up with goals, thinking about different content formats, things we might want to use, and how to actually distribute it, basically get it out there. And linked to that is SEO. And this is an area that I'm really passionate about because any sort of digital marketing, digital content, anything in sort of like the interwebs really needs a strong SEO strategy behind it. And so I'm going to touch on that. And then finally, I'm going to look at ways we can actually measure whether or not our strategy is actually successful and if it's actually working for us in the way that we want it to. Now, fundamentally, all of this information will be the basis of your content plan. And so we'll then wrap up by looking at a way to structure it. And in fact, we're going to share our content sort of calendar that we use at Southerly. We have a great template for you. So finally, just to kind of put it out there, if you do have any questions about this presentation, feel free to ping this over to us via Twitter. We're at Southerly Comms. And if you use the hashtag Southerly Webinar, we'll definitely find your question and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So this session is being recorded and it will be sent to you. So feel free to share it with others or watch it again to your heart's content. Right, everyone, let us begin. So before I moved into marketing, my approach to content was pretty much like a factory. And so basically, I would constantly churn out all types of features and articles, interviews, gig reviews, restaurant reviews. And to be actually fair, it was a lot of fun. But it got to a point where it became evident that as a journalist, I kind of felt like I was missing out on the bigger picture of the way my work was actually impacting the bottom line of the publishers that I worked for. And in some way, that's kind of the biggest challenge in the media at the moment, with so many organizations, trying to justify staff numbers, and it's not always 100% clear how my work, my writing was aligned with company goals. So I guess that's probably why it made more sense to me to move into marketing, because for me, I always wanted to know the end result of any sort of content that I was producing. And that's that sort of strategically thinking about content. That's something that I continue to do, so especially in my role at Southerly. That said, now that I'm in a different industry, I definitely appreciate that content strategy might be a new concept for many people. And for a long time, it was for myself. So for clarity, I think it's worth kicking off by defining what exactly is a content strategy. So according to web and content strategy expert Christina Halverson, a content strategy is plans for the creation, publication, and governance of useful and usable content. Now, this is a definition she came up with back in 2008, 10 years ago. But a decade later, it still stands true. And as an aside, I definitely would recommend an article that she wrote on this subject titled "The Discipline of Content Strategy strategy. And I'll make sure to include a link in the email to everybody who signed up for this webinar, in which I'll be sending out shortly. So before we start thinking about how we actually create a content strategy, or in fact implement one, it's really important that, as I mentioned, we kind of look at this bigger picture. So there's a few questions that you actually might want to start, you might want to ask yourself from the start. Firstly, what is the purpose of the organization you work in or your business, and where exactly is it at the moment? And so, this is looking at how things are going, if they're going well, if they could be going better. And you might just want to actually take a moment to review your business objectives. Where exactly do you want your business or organization to go? Think about things like, what are your marketing objectives? And it's actually worth pointing out that, marketing objectives and business objectives, they're two different things. Fundamentally, marketing objectives set out what a business wants to achieve from its marketing activities. And they should be consistent with your business goals, whatever those might be. But as long as they're kind of aligned, you can make sure that you're actually working towards sort of like the same goal. So once we've looked at the bigger picture, we can start looking at what I call my little content strategy cycle. And this is made up of sort of like the following questions. Firstly, why do I want to make this content? So this is thinking about, what challenges are you trying to solve by making content, rather than, say, advertising, taking out an ads sort of in a newspaper or magazine, or creating a marketing event. And what will you hope to get out of this? In an ideal world, what would be the dream outcome, for your business or your organization? And how will this content, if at all, meet your business goals? This is the point where you might want to set some long-term and short-term goals. You might also want to consider, are there any risk involved with making this content? Is it going to be costly? Is there something that might prevent us from succeeding? And then it's also thinking about, once you've decided that content is the way forward for you, and in many cases it can be such a successful way of kind of meeting your marketing and business goals. You then need to ask yourself, okay, how am I going to get this content out there? Do I need a budget? And if I do, how many people are going to be involved in this process? Is this a one-man operation, or is it a team effort? And, how often do we actually want to produce content? And then finally, how do we know, if at all, if this content is working for us? And this is where we kind of touch on the measurement and the importance of measurement when it comes to putting together a content strategy. Actually give this a go. We're going to make content for like 3 months, 6 months, to give it a year. And just FYI, any sort of content program needs a bit of time, just so you can determine what's working, what's not working. So, but even from the very beginning, you have to ask yourself, how long am I going to commit to doing this? And then finally, question, well, what have we learned from all of this? If I, send out loads of tweets at a certain time, is this effective? Should I send out, an Instagram post at a different time? This is a really great opportunity to kind of evaluate what you've done so far. And then from those learnings, you can kind of tweak your strategy and start the entire process again. So just to zone in on the first part of my cycle, why I'm making content. Truth be told, this is the foundation of your content strategy. And that requires you to come up with some goals you want to achieve with your content. Along with your goals, you're also going to have to think about metrics, as I mentioned before, to see if you've actually met these goals. And I'll discuss that in a bit more detail. There's a whole section on measurement. So your business goals should fundamentally determine your content objectives. So common goals for content might include, number one, brand awareness. How can I use content to establish my company or brand? Now, improving your brand awareness can feel like a bit of a tricky thing to sort of prove, especially as it's hard to determine if someone's actually seen your brand and, what are actually the most sort of valuable ways of measuring it. But it is important. Um, and also, a brand awareness goal is really just about ensuring that everything you create underpins what your brand is about. So it's an important one to have. Another common goal is traffic. And as long as I've worked, in the media, this has been the number one aim for any type of digital content I would produce. And by this, the aim was to sort of work out if a particular piece of content would increase traffic to our site. And if it could we capitalize it, to improve our current and future ad revenue? And, that's, again, as I mentioned, a bit of a challenge for sort of like the media industry nowadays. How can we actually prove that content is working for us? But a traffic goal is equally an important one, because the more traffic you get to your website, the more likelihood you're going to have people buying whatever it is that you are selling or servicing. Now, linked to a traffic goal is audience growth or lead generation. And that's being able to get people to show interest or, inquire about your products or services. And if you can acquire their contact information in the process, then, you've got yourself a lead. So for your business, you might want to achieve all three of these goals or just one. You might want to, in fact, focus on one goal for the first, sort of attempts at developing a content strategy. And then later down the line, you might want to, add on a few others. And in fact, depending on the type of content you're producing, so let's just use social media, for example, you might say that Instagram and sort of doing anything on the gram is all about your brand awareness goal. And then you might just focus on, the traffic for your website. But of course, a lot of these goals do cross over. But the most important thing is remembering that any piece of content you create needs to have a purpose. It needs to achieve at least one of these goals. So on to the creative part. The next part of the content cycle is, what am I going to make? Now, I'm going to just share at least 4 tried and tested content types that a business or organization should really be investing time and resource in, simply because they work. And they will also help you, meet many of those goals that I shared. So number 1 is blogging, and I am a massive blogging fan, and it's probably the reason why I've been blogging for such a long time. Now, I mean, I've been blogging since, I think, 2005, 2004, when blogging was seriously old school. But, over the last decade, whether it's blogging personally or for businesses, it's definitely proven to be the digital gift that keeps on giving. And you only have to look at some of the stats from over the years to see that that is in fact true. So for instance, business to business marketers using blogs actually generate 67% more leads than websites without blogs. And that's a stat from HubSpot. And then following that, 60% of consumers feel more positive about a company after reading custom content on its site. And just to kind of expand upon that, when you create content for a business website, a lot of that content is sort of made as a one-off, whether it's the information on your About Us page or your Contact Us page. It's pretty static. But the great thing about blogging is that, it's showing to sort of like Google and search engines that you're, staying up to date, that you're kind of keeping things fresh on your website. And I'm going to touch on that further when I discuss SEO. So just some of the benefits of blogging, in case you needed a bit of convincing, is that number 1, blogging kind of creates a real unique opportunity to create unique content and develop a niche within your industry or field. And so no matter what type of business you run or organization you run, blogging is a really great chance to kind of get your voice out there, show your sort of brand personality. And naturally, people who are into what you're doing will find you online. And this is where you can kind of get that increase in your traffic. And linked to that is also blogging's ability to improve your searchability, and that's just your SEO. But if you want to understand the power of blogging further, I definitely recommend this book. It's called Become a Better Business Blogger in 30 Days. Join the Blogging Challenge for Better Visibility, Leads, and Influence by Sarah Arrow. Now, this is a really popular ebook that you can get just for a $5 on Amazon. Nothing. That's practically nothing. And it's perfect if you've never blogged before or basically want to know how to approach it a lot more strategically. So the next content format that I go on about all the time is video. Now, this is a format that's grown exponentially over the years. And according to research from Cisco V&I forecast, video is actually going to account for 79% of global internet traffic within 2 years. And that's going to be up from 63% in 2015. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty hardcore. There's no doubt that we are totally in the video age, especially when you consider how much easier and cheaper it is to make and record videos nowadays. You can do it on your phone, smartphones. You can use Instagram stories, Facebook Live, of course, YouTube, Snapchat. There's so many ways to actually create video. And, whether you want to go down the professional end or even just do something that's just kind of instant and quick, there's kind of no excuse nowadays to not use video. Some of the benefits of video include the fact that it is regarded nowadays, particularly as the most engaging form of online content. It does drive traffic to your website. And I think, when we talk about content, it's hard to deny that video is just a really great way of simplifying and delivering complex messages in a way that's so engaging and so entertaining. Video also allows you to tell your brand stories visually and audibly, and more importantly, it increases your online presence and visibility. So video is super important, and any sort of investment within it is definitely worthwhile. Next up is the email newsletter. And funnily enough, I actually read a book recently called Do Open, How a Simple Email Newsletter Can Transform Your Business. And in it, the author outlines why newsletters are not just a distribution tool, but a vital form of content in itself that is just so easy to dismiss. And I'm a massive fan of newsletters. I've been using MailChimp, for instance, for years. And there's so many great reasons and benefits to adding newsletters to your content plan and calendar. Firstly and foremost, email is almost 40 times more effective, 40 times more effective than Facebook and Twitter combined in helping businesses acquire new customers. That's pretty incredible. Newsletters are also a direct link to your audience or customer, and you almost have to look at it as a way of just building a community around your business and being able to communicate with them, whenever you can or whenever is appropriate. Newsletters are also great for promoting your best content as well as your products and services in a way that's really convenient for your audience. And, if somebody opts into your newsletter, it's because they actually want to hear and receive emails from you. So don't be put off by the fact that, we all get emails that we don't want to receive. Our inboxes can sometimes be a nightmare, but just bear in mind that people who opt in do want what you're offering. And this is, to the benefit of your audience. Newsletters, finally, they also strengthen your brand recognition. And if you are using like a tool, for instance, like MailChimp, you can get metrics. You can kind of see how your newsletters are performing, and it can just give you more insight into what's really working for your business content-wise. Last but not least is the social post. Now, there's so many approaches to the social post nowadays, and you might be familiar with things such as memes on Instagram. Like you'll get sort of like these motivational Monday illustrated kind of graphic post, or Throwback Thursday, that type of thing. Well, they're really great. They actually do a really great job at, helping to position yourself as, an expert in some cases. And just the fact that they're visual, people tend to engage with visual content more than non-visual content. And on Twitter, posts with images are actually 94% more likely to be retweeted. And then another benefit of kind of creating a social post is that you can take ownership of a quote or a fact with your own branding. I've seen people share like Maya Angelou or Martin Luther King quotes and just have their little logo, beside it. And by no means is this sort of, copyright infringement. It's just sort of, positioning yourself with, sort of well-known quotes and facts. And as long as you acknowledge the source of the quote, then you're absolutely fine on the copyright front. And then there's also the fact that, memes and illustrated posts are just a highly shareable form of content, and they can definitely help to increase your social media presence. And also they can be repurposed. So you can have a post that's on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, within your newsletter, within a video, it can be used in so many different ways. So I've kind of just touched on this briefly, but your distribution channels are kind of essential to your content strategy, because it can be really hard to find an audience for all this great stuff you're making. That's just the honest truth. So you'll need to spend a good amount of time getting your content out there so it's leading people back to your website and overall your products and your services. Now, some of the distribution methods that you can see here will be common sense. So for instance, your blog, that's usually distributed via a website. But equally, any blog post you write should be shared on your social media channels, your newsletter, and perhaps another platform or website that syndicates your content. So for instance, Southerly has a partnership with the Business to Community website, and they just share a select number of our blog posts every week to their audience. And that's just a great partnership that we developed with them. And actually, you'd find that those types of partnerships are easier than you imagine. So if, let's say, you were sort of you had a flower shop, you'd be surprised that maybe your local newspaper might want, content for your expertise, in that area. So the key is to make sure that you're making the most of your own distribution channels, but also sort of looking out and seeing if there's other ways that you can share your content. You might also want to consider paid content distribution, maybe doing a bit on Google Ads, or social media ads, display ads to kind of amplify awareness around your content. And also the great thing about that is that, you can set your budget. So that in itself doesn't have to be a costly exercise. Now on to target audiences. Everything you choose to do, your content types and your distribution channels, whatever you choose and decide, this will no doubt be determined by your target audiences. And you have to ask yourself, how exactly do I want my audience to think, feel, or what action do I want them to take when they come into contact with my content? Well, to make sure your content reaches the right people in the right way, you should definitely consider working with personas if you are not already. Now, personas are fictional characters created to represent the different needs, goals, motivations, and behaviors of your target audiences. Now, this is something that's entrenched in everything we do at Southerly and also for our clients. So to learn more about this, I will definitely include links to a few blog posts that we've written about personas. And we also have a guide, a lovely downloadable guide, and all of that will be in an email post webinar. So for the next part of this webinar, we're gonna finally be looking at SEO. I've hinted at it before. So in choosing your content, it's important not to neglect the role of SEO has in content creation, especially if the content will be on your website and you want this content to help increase your visibility through search engines. I mean, after all, that is the purpose of SEO, the process of optimizing your website so you can appear in search results and get as much traffic as possible. So for me, there's actually a two-step process that I take before making my content to ensure that it ticks all of the right SEO boxes. So step number one, have you researched the keywords people may use to find your content in the first place? Now, if SEO is entirely new to you, I know that might sound a little bit daunting and it might sound like an extra task, but it's so important. This is simply just finding, if I went into Google, what exactly would I type in to get to your website, for you to kind of come up in the search results. Um, so really you want to think about keywords that are appropriate to your industry. So if I, run a bookshop, naturally a keyword would be bookshop. However, that's a little bit too broad. You want to be able to hone in on a keyword that's unique enough to what you do. So for instance, at Southerly, we have optimized all of our website content and in fact all of our content with the phrase creative content agency. And in fact, Google us and let me know where we rank. Tweet me. That should be some evidence as to the benefits of actually investing in SEO. So finding those keywords, finding those long tail keywords. Now, these are those 2, 3 to 4 word phrases that are specific to what you do. So in Southerly's case, creative content agency. This can really attract the right type of people who want what you offer. So to find keywords you rank for and sort of their position. So by ranking, this is what number do you show up on Google? Are you number 3? Are you number 19? Never fear if you're number 19, by the way, you can always improve that ranking. So I say always use Google's Search Console. It's a free platform and it definitely lets you monitor the search results for your website. You can see a link to it there. Have a play around with it, explore it. There's so many tutorials on the interwebs about how to kind of get your head around it. But just to kind of give you a few tips, once you get to the main search console via that link, you just need to add your website as a property and then verify it. But if you have someone who manages your website, they can do this for you. And if you do not, it is so much easier than it sounds. You can definitely find some tutorials online. So once your website is sort of verified and it's good to go, you can sort of look in a section called search traffic and then search analytics to just see the keywords. In search analytics speak, this is known as queries. And so these are just the words that people have basically typed in to find your content. You can also see what position you rank for in your respective keyword. And you can actually go a little bit deeper. Like you can actually sort of follow a rabbit hole of so many different sort of analytics around how people are searching for you. But again, I don't want to get bogged down in SEO. And this is very much just a snippet of kind of beginner to intermediate SEO practice. But hopefully you should find it useful. And in fact, I will be sharing a webinar that we have done previously on SEO. So that will also be included in your follow-up email. So, I mentioned long tail keywords. A really clever way that I learned recently about how to sort of find long tail keywords is actually using Google's search predictions. So this is basically when you type in 2 words and Google will kind of then suggest like a list of what it thinks you might be searching for. Well, actually, some of those words can give you a really good indication of long tail keywords that you actually might want to start optimizing for. So for instance, with running shoes, which I've used as an example here, running shoes for flat feet, for instance, you may very well have a section on your website if you are a shoe shop that specializes in that. There's absolutely no reason why you can't start using that keyword throughout your content and seeing if you can start ranking for that, because obviously people are searching for it. And that's what Google's search prediction is all about. It's about presenting the keywords that people are actually using for, looking for even. And also, you might want to extend your search further. So rather than just typing in, saying the name of your business or the type of business you run, you might want to actually use phrases like why running shoes or what running shoes alongside, your main keyword, because that can also give you a whole host of other potential long tail keywords that you might want to start using in your content. So once you've kind of got your keyword research out of the way, and just to kind of add, you just maybe want to focus on 10 keywords to begin with and work up. This is not about, there are bigger companies who might want to optimize for so much more, but if this is new to you, just start small and then you can build up. So as I said, once you've got your keyword research out of the way, step 2 is brainstorming content ideas. And I guess the key with any sort of content you're creating is that it should kind of fit into 3 categories. Number 1, it has to be quality. So it can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to quickly put this out there. There has to be some thought process that goes into it. And, why wouldn't you want to put that type of content out there anyway? It's the kind of content that people are attracted to and just naturally performs better. You want to create content that asks a question. So essentially, search engines are fundamentally there to help people find answers to their questions. And if you can answer a question, whether it's like different types of cacti that you might want to, use in your home, people are going to be Googling this stuff. So any type of content that you create, and I'm thinking more like blog content, if it can answer a question, if it can answer one of those search results, then you're definitely onto a winner. And then last but not least, it has to be unique. And you'll find that so many different websites are writing about the same type of things. So maybe using the sort of shoe shop analogy, you will find best running shoes for women in 2018. It might be worth kind of changing the angle a little bit. It might be best running shoes if you hate running, or, best shoes to wear if you are new to running, things like any sort of unique angle, that definitely gives you plus points with Google. And just also as another point, Google prefers written content to be so much longer than shorter, and it definitely sort of prioritizes quality over quantity. So remember I talked about churning at the beginning of this presentation? Yeah, Google's not into that. Google really wants to see that a website is presenting and hosting sort of worthwhile content. So as I mentioned, we did a webinar previously some months ago, and it's a beginner's guide on SEO. So that should definitely give you a bit more of an insight as to how to approach that. So for the final part of this webinar, we're going to take a look at must-have metrics for success. And this is really just determining whether or not, your content program is getting the results you're looking for. So earlier, we talked about choosing your content goals in line with what you hope to achieve with your business or organization. Well, those content goals will also determine your key performance indicators, or your KPIs, that you're going to use to measure success. So here's just a rundown of some of the things you should consider according to the goal that you set. So let's start with brand awareness. A KPI could be social mentions. How many did you receive in a given month for a particular piece of content? And, our editor at Southerly, he is all over this. He's so hot on this. He kind of knows if he posts a tweet, what's our engagement there, and are people retweeting it? Are people actually, mentioning Southerly in any context? All these things are definitely worth capturing. And, similar metrics that relate to social media could include things like number of likes, shares, or views, and I will also include links to the analytic sites for platforms like Twitter and Facebook, because you can see all of this information. It's sort of free, it's public. LinkedIn actually requires you to go into your company page to see how posts or anything you share on LinkedIn is performing. But from there, you can kind of choose analytics and just see how things are getting on. Another brand awareness KPI that's definitely worth mentioning is your earned media. But this is kind of similar to social mentions, but on a much bigger scale. This is looking at the free publicity that you might have gained organically through your content marketing efforts. So this could be mentioned in mass media like newspapers, the radio, TV, internet articles or other blogs, as well as sort of ratings and reviews on websites like Google, TripAdvisor, Amazon, Facebook. All of that counts as earned media. A third KPI for brand awareness, which is kind of more about testing out the quality of the content you're making, but definitely worth having a look at, is the number of people that are actually returning to your website. This is a really good indication that, say, your blog content, for instance, is offering something of value. I'm not sure if you use Google Analytics. If you don't, you should be. And as I mentioned before, there are so many tutorials, easy ones, simple ones to kind of get your head around a lot of this stuff. But in Google Analytics, there is a section under an area called behavior, and it's called frequency and recency. And in that section, you can actually see how many people have come to your website once, twice, etc. over a period of time. Naturally, you'll be interested in how many people have come back at least twice, because that indicates that they're really interested in what you're doing. And it's just worth keeping an eye on that figure. There's also another section called new versus returning, which will also give you a similar insight. And then lastly, another great brand awareness KPI is engagement time, which you'll also see in Google Analytics. And that's within the engagement section. You'll get to see how long someone has spent on your website. And this also relates to a metric called bounce rate, which I'm not going to get into at this point. But I think engagement is my personal preference, because Google kind of shows how long someone has been on your website. And the tricky thing with actually the engagement metric is that Google kind of puts everything in the 0 to 10-second category, irrespective of how long people have been on your website. So the best bet is to sort of pay attention to anything sort of from 11 seconds upward. So that's sort of KPIs, brand awareness KPIs in a nutshell. The next KPI for lead generation, the obvious one, if anything, is definitely traffic. The more search traffic a piece of content is bringing to your website, definitely the better. And linked to that is another important KPI, and that's the percentage or number of leads gained from your audience. So, traffic in of itself is great, but it can definitely be a vanity metric if that traffic doesn't result in an action. So, if you've created a piece of content with what we call to action, so you're kind of inspiring and urging people to do something once they've gotten to the end of your content. Are they going to pick up the phone? Are they going to send an email? Are they going to sign up to your newsletter? All these things. It's so important that anything that you're creating can potentially lead to an action, hopefully a lead of some sort. So you've got your goals, and you may have a vague idea of what you want to create content-wise. You've probably established some KPIs, or you might need to still figure them out. But KPIs are important because that's what you're going to be using to measure success. You basically have the foundation of a content plan. But we now need to put it into something that's easy to access, adapt, and update as you create your content. Now, of course, this can just be an Excel doc. We actually have a template that you can use from a blog post that we wrote some months ago. And I will also include a link to that in the follow-up email. Or if you go into our website and you search editorial calendar Southerly, you can find it that way too. But if you want to create your own content plan in Excel, we kind of suggest the following items. First and foremost, you should have two sheets, one for a year overview and then the other for a monthly breakdown. And the year overview should include the following rows or columns, is up to you. So business quarters, breaking that down. And we tend to review our content plan every quarter. That's kind of the way we approach it. So it's good that you kind of have business quarters outlined in your content plan. You might want to include holidays and seasons because all these things can inspire content, especially if you're creating seasonal content. And to add to that, seasonal events, things that are very specific to your own industry, is definitely worth making a note of in your plan. Any major deadlines for projects that you're working on, or anything that's happening in your business, you definitely want to make a note of that. And then finally, your content marketing goals and your metrics. All of this should just be visible, a snapshot of what you're trying to achieve with your content. Now, aside from the months in the year, the monthly breakdown, which is on sheet 2, should have the following: the title of your content, the type of content that you're creating. So is it a video? Is it a blog post? Is it an infographic? Is it a tweet? Is it a social post, etc., etc.? You should definitely make a note of the editor or producer. If you are a one-man band, then obviously, you'll make a note of yourself. Or, you very well may outsource this to someone, but it's obviously good to capture that information. Status is really good to get a sense of where you are with that piece. So if you're planning your content plan in advance or far in advance, you can start creating your content, within months or within weeks, and it's just worthwhile being able to know if it's completed, if it's still in draft mode, that sort of thing. And then we also, on our content plans, we include our marketing personas. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have a guide on how to create those. But, everything that you're creating has to sort of be linked to an audience. You're not sort of making things just for making sake. It has to appeal to, someone within your target audience. So, tracking your metrics. Once you've got a working content plan, you need to set regular checkpoints in to see how everything is going. I mentioned earlier that we check things quarterly, but you have to check. That's the most important thing. You need to see, are my blog posts working? Are people sort of reading them? What's the engagement time like? Are people potentially sharing them on social? If I post more social posts, will this kind of make an impact? Should I be posting more? Should I be posting less? Did you kind of get a good return on your videos? By analyzing the results of your output, you can kind of adjust and tweak things as you go along. And, this is just a very agile way of learning. It's all about testing and learning. And naturally, the benefits of tracking your metrics regularly just means you can kind of save time and resources. So it's super important to keep an eye on things as you go along. So finally, you got to remember, this planning, it's all about, it's a plan fundamentally, and it might take some time or adapting before you see the results you're after. But whatever the case, it's important that you plan. It's important that you're thinking strategically about your content, because if you do, you'll definitely start to see results, and you'll start to see, certain goals definitely being met. And as the saying goes, we all know this saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And in 2018, that is the last thing any of us plan to do. Pun intended. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you took something valuable away from this webinar. And as I mentioned at the top of the session, if you have any questions at all, please tweet us at Southerly Comms using the hashtag Southerly Webinar.